I can't help but think back to my childhood and see how insanely strange it all really was. As an actual child, it somehow never seemed very odd, but now, looking back, it definitely does. Most of these were in the town of Elk City, Idaho, and some of these events seem very connected. It all started out when I was about 1.5 years old. I was smart for a young kid, my parents always said, and learned to talk at a very young age. My mom remembers me at that age crying and telling her that I didn't want to sleep in that room ever again, because the Eskimo baby doll looked at me and nodded. She said I then proceeded to do a nodding motion. She removed the doll from my room, but it still exists in storage in my other house. She finds it specifically strange because I was super honest, and toddlers that young don't typically lie whatsoever. I seemed genuinely shocked and terrified. Next strange experience were the dreams I had around this time period as well. Strange, vivid nightmares. People may say I could have got these dreams from watching scary movies or things like that, but it wasn't like that at all. I wasn't even allowed to watch Scooby-Doo till age 7. At that age, I was carefully raised and overprotected with what I was allowed to watch. Mostly only Christian kids' cartoons and Baby Einstein. These nightmares I got were very strange and ended up becoming a recurring theme throughout my childhood, with the same dream character tormenting me. The dream started with my mom dropping me off at some sort of party. There's a ton of kids there, and on stage is revealed to be someone in a creepy pig costume, with very lazy eyes and a smile. It was picking up and kissing kids across the room. My mom kept asking me if I wanted to go up and kiss the costume, but I refused to and felt a sickening fear and sense of impending doom throughout all of me. Eventually she left, and I was forced to go up to the pig costume, but before I fully walked over, I stopped frozen and just stared. The longer I waited, the more it stared directly at me in a mocking way in the dark distance. It felt like pure evil. It just stared at me in a way that felt evil, but with the same lifeless, lazy eyes and smile, and these words entered my mind. The thing's name, Miss Molly. I then woke up. I had the same dream non-stop my entire childhood, with the same pig costume. Another dream involving the costume was my parents forcing me to go to a huge opera theatre, where she'd be on stage performing the whole time, me being the only one, knowing something was bad wrong, and she always focused and dead on me. I even remember the smell in these dreams, and when I smelt the smell of an old steakhouse in town at night when I was older, I'd get instant flashbacks to the smell and feel of these dreams. Now that I know what animatronic restaurants were like Pizza Time Theatre, it seemed a lot like that in the dreams though. I'd never heard of such restaurants or been to one. I didn't even know what it was until I was in my teens. Around this time as these dreams, my mom and I always would not go into my room and try to stay out with her as much as possible. And when she asked why, I'd say, Geefy is in my closet. I never explained to her what Geefy was, however. More incidents after, at around 3 to 4 years old, including me being terrorized by shadow hands. I remember staying at a hotel room during that time. I had just bought an electric SpongeBob toy that talked when pressed on the hand, and I was sleeping with it that night. I remember it randomly talked without me pressing it, saying a phrase I hadn't heard before. This shocked me enough to throw it off the bed. Later that same night, I heard knocking on the hotel window. I looked out, and through the curtain blinds, I saw the shadow of a long, stretched-up arm reaching up into my hotel window and making the devil horn sign with its hand. I remember I then hid under the covers the rest of the night and fell asleep. I wouldn't have known what that symbol meant at that age. That same hotel, I also remember having a painting that I avoided an entire bathroom over. I would have to go to a bathroom outside of the hotel instead because it scared me so much. I remember nothing of what the painting was, only the true horror it invoked in me and told me it wasn't safe to look at it. As I got older, 6 to 7, the paranormal events started back up a lot harder than ever. The shadow hands never went away, but now there was more. I started having more dreams of the pig costume that I dreamed of as a toddler, but in different scenarios. I had one dream that the pig costume lured me into my grandmother's barn, where they were cooking and boiling people alive, and torturing them in various ways, but this time, there were many different costumes. I also dreamed I entered my grandmother's butcher house in the pure dark at night, and saw the same pig costume. Miss Molly on all fours, creepily sliding and crawling up to me in the dark, silently but fast. Its heavy, lazy eyes gleaming in the dark. For some reason, I always knew the costume was hollow inside. There was always a sense there was no human inside the suit, like it was possessed. Another creepy costume-related dream I had involved me walking into my classroom, where everyone was being very annoying. Kids being gross and teasing me with snot and things. I left the classroom in the dream to find time, had completely warped, and somehow, between walking in and out of the classroom, 1 second later, time had changed to after school hours. I was locked inside the school. Everything was dark, and it had been completely abandoned. I remember roaming the halls until I came across a tall, hollow duck costume in the distance. It had super long legs, and its long neck was bent backwards, staring directly at me from between its legs with huge black eyes. It said in a creepy voice, "I'm home," and then proceeded to come after me. I remember just curling into a ball on the floor, accepting death in the dream, and closing my eyes before waking up from it. I had way too many creepy costume dreams to count, but these are some of the most memorable. Besides dreams, creepy encounters when I was alive happened constantly. I remember I had a whirly-gig windmill toy that would spin and spin on its own at a certain time at night, and a creepy tall giraffe toy I'd see blink at me. I also remember the strangest memory of my childhood in which I woke up in the middle of the night to an entire scene being played on my curtains. It was like my curtains had turned into a movie theatre screen, playing some kind of vision. In this vision, I showed a super destructive storm crashing everywhere, a huge sense of turmoil and panic, and a huge sailboat in the distance. On this sailboat was a puppet carrying and screaming for help, looking at something in the distance and the huge ship deck he was laying on, coming closer and closer to him as crates crashed everywhere. I didn't want to see what happened next. Everything in me told me not to see what happened next. I tried to look away, but everything that was dark from the night in my room, the scenes would begin playing on. Even when I closed my eyes, I wasn't safe of seeing the whole scene play out before my eyes. I've never heard of any other experience like this. I then ran to the living room eventually. On my way, the walls still playing the scene every time I glanced. I look at the clock and specifically remember it being 7 a.m. and feeling safer knowing I wouldn't have to sleep for long. It then stopped. Never experienced anything that wild again. That is, until years later, when my grandmother went missing in our technology-deprived hillbilly town in Idaho, and we were woken up in the middle of the night to go help search for her. The nights will always be one of the strangest things I've ever had, or maybe the strangest. It's when I think I encountered some kind of demon. Everyone was searching for her, scared, and Things and I had to stay back at the camp with some relatives. I remember I saw this, I'll just call it a hallucination, that seemed to look like the character Lakitu in Mario. He asked me if I wanted to make a contract with him and work for him. I accepted. I remember how real he talked to me, how he felt. It felt much realer than a mere imaginary friend or something of the likes. I acted as I worked for him and did silly tasks for him, but time with him got stranger and stranger. This hallucination stayed with me far after the search party found my grandmother and we returned home. For a full year he stayed. The more he stayed, though, the more he started showing his darker side, revealing himself to be more and manipulative and basically a huge jerk. The time when I realized I wanted him out of my life and he became worse and worse to me, I'll always remember because my mom said how I scared her during this time period. When we stayed looking after a friend's house while he was away, and how I didn't behave as usual. She even asked others for help because I was out of character, violent and horrible. During this same period is when I remembered the Lakitu turning on me the most and showing himself more and more visibly all around me, not leaving me alone, laughing at me, mocking at me. I remember the more he stayed, the more his friends appeared. They looked like demons. I remember there being a red one who felt female and had a strange sexual vibe to it that did overly disgusting acts I won't go into, involving feces and other things. I remember once I was fed up with this Lakitu hallucination and the others with it and told him to leave me and never come back. I'll never forget seeing a stairway up to the sky appear and then running up it, cackling and laughing, screaming and mocking me as they ascended. Never saw anything like it again. A similar encounter, however, happened when the pig costume nightmares came to an unexpected stop. When I had a vivid dream in which a protective type creature entered the dream and told me I will never have to see Miss Molly again. But in order to never encounter again, he would have to sacrifice his life for me, and I'd never see this good entity again either. I accepted this, and I dreamed a long battle which ended in him giving me a giant's hammer and crushing a shrunken down version of the costume, killing it permanently. I remember how disturbing it felt feeling all its bones and organs crush and pop underneath the hammer. The protector spirit then died. I never dreamed of the pig costume that haunted my dreams for years and years as a kid. Ever since that dream, not even once. Not even up until now. It actually worked somehow. Strange. Weird nightmares still persisted though, and more paranormal incidences too. Too many to list, but some including me finding a Mario toy from the thrift shop that had creepy, depressing, heartbreaking vibes to it I can't explain. Even my dad said it felt creepy. I later on dreamed this toy belonged to a kid that had died in a mysterious way, involving a manhole by the sewers. And in the dream, I found the toy in a grocery store and began crying. The toy had his initials on it. I also remember encountering something very creepy while playing alone with the toy. In rural Idaho, it was easy to get lost, and I remember playing in the forests alone with it, far away from the house. The silence felt very eerie and depressing. I remember finding some kind of gross flesh-looking substance on the ground, filled with holes which the dog I was with began trying to eat. My blood ran cold, and I felt to run and not look back, and I did. Later on, the dog owner said she had also come back with a human finger bone from that same woods, if that could be related. It felt more creepy, knowing I brought that strange Mario toy with me during. The final creepy event I'll note here is my skinwalker type incidents. I remember walking outside one night to let the dog out and saw a giant shaggy creature begin running around to the other side of the house where I was about to go. It looked like a dog, but more in length to a human. Too big to be a dog and no sound, strangely. I remember its carpety-like hair from what I saw. I got back inside immediately. Later on, I had a vivid dream that I heard the sound of a baby crying outside the walls of my cabin. So I dropped to the floor and began crawling out of my room and to the bathroom for safety. But the baby crying sound continued crying and screaming and followed me to the bathroom from outside. Everywhere I crawled in the dream, it followed me all the way to the door. It wasn't a baby crying and following me outside the house. I knew in my heart it was something mimicking a baby, trying to lure me to go out there and open the door. I'll never forget how horrifying it felt. It doesn't help as well the many other creepy encounters I've heard from other people who lived in that same town of Elk City, Idaho. From UFO encounters, creepy life-haunting noises, demonic activity, etc. I also heard creepy whistling noises, always sounding like they were trying to lure me into the woods. Saw a lot of things since I was allowed to play anywhere, even the forests away from my house, but these are just my personal childhood experiences. Additional information. I found out later on, my parents have also experienced a lot of supernatural things, more than most in their life. My dad has been known to see a second set of eyes on people before finding out they've done something horrible. Not too long afterwards. My mom had an out-of-body experience during pregnancy in which she could move around out of body and see the others in the hospital and what they were saying before returning a while after, as well as other out-of-body experiences she has. I'm not sure if these kind of things are genetic in any way. Also, the guy my dad saw the eyes on was someone who was a friend to our family and at our house a lot. Me and him didn't interact much as I was very young, but he was visiting a lot. A little bit later, that my mom had a vivid nightmare in which the same guy stood over my bed and opened his mouth as an unhinged innumerably, letting all this dark energy and evil into me. After this, our family stopped seeing the guy. It's strange because he was very nice and never did anything bad to anyone or to me, but they just had a sense about him. He also had paranormal encounters in his past, as he claimed to have had an alien abduction. It's strange how everything seems to be connected in a strange way. I grew up in a very small town in Australia and went to a very small primary school, about 80 people. I was talking to my best friend Laura, and we were passing stories back and forth about our childhood. And I mentioned I used to have a best friend called Laura as well in primary school that I haven't thought about in years. I told her about how we used to hate the popular girls and created a code that we would write and talk to shit about them things, like they were mean and ugly, childish insults. I decided after leaving her house to see if I could find my primary school friend on Facebook. Growing up in a small town means it's very easy to find people from your life in there. You normally have multiple friends in common. I typed her name in and couldn't find her. I decided to go through the friends from primary school friend list, as I know a lot of girls that use their middle name as a last name on Facebook. Not sure why people do this, but surely one of them would be a friend with her. After searching for a while, I had no luck and gave up. Maybe she doesn't have it. A couple of days later, I received a call from my father, catching up, asking how I'm doing. I asked him if he remembered Laura, as I remember my father knew her auntie, as they would always talk when picking us both from school. And he used to work for her family. My father thought for a while and told me he doesn't remember at all. He did remember the family, as I told him the last name, but told me I never went to the school with any of their children, as they were a rich family. And they all went to private school. I was a bit freaked out, but my dad has a terrible memory, so I guessed it was just that, but I was still curious. I decided to ring one of my friends from primary school, let's call him Aaron, to ask if he remembered her. He told me no, but when I brought up the code me and Laura had, he told me he remembers having that code and using it in school, but no one else knew what it was. This is where I'm lost. I've been asking everyone about her and no one remembers. I started to get really frustrated at this point and dug up old school photos to put this to rest. Looking tonight, the photo gave me literal chills. I looked through every year I started to shake she's not there in any of them. I don't know why I remember her so clearly, yet she doesn't exist. Why the fuck would I make a code up that only I knew how to read? It doesn't make any sense. Anyway, I just needed to get this off my chest. I feel like a part of my life has been taken away. And if it's happened before, could it happen again? Thanks for listening, guys. Edit. Hey, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for all the upvotes. I did expect to see this much response. For those who wanted an update, here it is. I went back to my house and visited my hometown, and also decided to do some investigating. Firstly, I visited my dad and got him to call the auntie of Laura that I remembered after talking to her on the phone. She told us she had two nieces, Kate and Amy, and confirmed that neither went to my primary school, and they are both older than me, the youngest being 5 years older, so wouldn't have been in my year. I didn't get time to visit my old primary school, but my mum had the school yearbooks that I didn't have, so I was able to go through them to see again and couldn't find her. Also, for those who are wondering, my school photo book, there is a little section on the bottom that shows who was absent on photo day, so I crossed that idea off. But here's where it gets strange. I got to the point where I decided I must have made her up, as some sort of friend I made in my head when I didn't have many. But here's the strange part. One night, I decided to meet up with some friends at the pub, have a beer and catch up. While I ran into many people I've known, though, the year including ones from primary school. One of the girls I knew, let's say Alice, was there, and came over and did the usual how are you, what's new, and so forth. See, at this point, I had met up with Aaron as we were doing our normal catch-up that we do every time I go back to visit, and he decided to mention to Alice about Laura, as I had talked to him about her a couple weeks ago. He was mocking me, saying shit like OP actually believed his imaginary friend was real, laughing and pointing at me. Alice just looked at him dumbfounded, and after a bit said, yeah, he did have a friend Laura. I never talked to her, but they always hung out at lunch. You guys would always be drawing or some shit together, yeah? My eyes widened. I yelled out yes, to the point the whole bar almost heard me. Alice just giggled and looked at me and said, well, she was real, I do remember her, sort of jokingly making out Aaron to be the idiot for not remembering. Alice asked what she was doing now. I played it off and said we didn't keep in touch. I didn't really feel like explaining the whole thing and sounding crazy, but Aaron was just quiet the whole time. After saying goodbye to Alice, Aaron just looked at me and shook his head. You're fucking haunted or some shit, mate. Again, playing it off. Because at this point, I just want to forget about it. I reply, yeah, I must be. And we didn't talk about it for the rest of the night. Thanks for listening, people. At this point, I'm just not going to think about it and let it fade away in my memories. I've been spending way too much mental power on this last couple of weeks. And I feel drained. And I think I'm never going to get a clear answer. And I'm going to have to leave it at that. So I have a few kind of weird stories from my childhood. I used to, and sometimes still do, confuse dreams with reality, or mix things up. Maybe I'm searching for something when I'm awake, but can't find it, so when I go to sleep, I search and find things while dreaming. And then wake up and search in the place I did when I was dreaming, and there it is. The thing I was searching for. I don't know if that's weird or normal. Anyway, I remember one time I was sleeping with my grandma in her room, and a lady came up to me to show me something in the backyard. I was scared of everything when I was little, but I still went with her. Don't know why. She looked nice. She had dark hair and a white flowy dress, like fancy pajamas. She opens the door and we walk together. My grandma always closed the door at night, but then something woke me up. My eyes were open, so it felt like snapping back into reality instead of waking up. Maybe I was sleeping with my eyes open? And the door was half open. Like I said, my grandma never left the door open at night. She even locked it sometimes because she was scared of ghosts. So when I wake up and see the door open, I got so scared. It was almost 4 a.m., so I stayed awake until everyone woke up. I was playing with my friends out in the streets. It was like 5 p.m. Then it started raining like crazy, and the sky went completely black. Everyone ran to their houses. I got into mine, and it was completely alone. My family was out. So I tried to turn on all the lights, but the power's out. I'm freaking out because I'm scared of the dark and I feel uneasy. So I run to my grandma's room because it's the closest and has a lantern and candles. There was another room in the back of the house that I hated because it scared the crap out of me. So when I get to my grandma's room, I try to open the door, but it won't open. Like it's locked from the inside, but there's no one home. I keep trying and trying to stay calm, but it's not working. And then I start crying and panicking while trying to open the door and push it with all my strength, but still nothing. So while crying and frantically trying to open the damn door, I start saying, please, please, open, please. And then boom, it opens like I haven't been trying for 10 minutes straight. I get in, find a lantern, and barricade myself until my family arrives 1 hour later. I was around 7 or 8 years old at the time. This happened in December 2020. Backstory. On December 11th, 2004, my grandfather passed away. I was 13. Almost immediately, the 3 sons and 3 daughters tore the family in two and continued to feud. In February 2011, my grandmother passed away while I was deployed overseas. I was 20. After her death, the 3 sisters sold off the house and hoarded the family recipes and heirlooms. I only wanted one thing. I wanted my grandfather's dog tags. Being the only grandchild to serve in the military, it was something that meant something to me. Sadly, I was told that I wouldn't appreciate them and was essentially dismissed, so I never asked for anything else. After I was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps, I pursued a career as a chef. Over time, I started to really want to recover certain family recipes. I had cut ties with the family because I wasn't going to pick sides, and I either wanted the family to be together or I didn't want to be part of it. I haven't been in contact in years. My last contact was in August 2013, when barely any of the family attended my wedding. The first week of December, I was talking with my brother. I only keep contact with him and my father. My brother mentioned how awesome it would have been to have the recipe for my grandparents' zucchini relish. They made it fresh with ingredients from the garden, jarred it, and it was a big hit with the family. A few days later, I was writing a letter to accompany some recipes that I was sending to a friend for Christmas. I wrote the letter while I was taking a ferry ride to an island I was to work on that day. When I finished the letter, I tucked it into a pouch that I had never used on my backpack. The pouch is basically where your back meets the pack. It's open at the top and it's quite narrow. The letter remained there until the end of the week. Friday, December 11th, 2020. I return home after work and immediately reach into that small, narrow pouch while focused on getting my house key ready. I pull out a piece of weathered paper. Confused as this isn't the letter, I'm now focused on this paper while thinking to myself, what the hell? The paper's weathered, written in a blue ink, which reminded me of the cheap blue pens my grandfather kept around the house. And the handwriting is vaguely familiar. I proceed to read and a chill goes right up my spine. It was the zucchini relish recipe that my brother and I had talked about days prior. I immediately message him and he's wanting me to look at the date. It's 12/11. In other words, it's the anniversary of my grandfather's death, and one of my grandparents' recipes spontaneously appears in an unlikely place. I audibly thanked my grandfather as I walked into my house with the recipe in hand. Even more eerie is the fact that my brother has told me that the 3 daughters don't have possession of this recipe, and yet here it is in my possession.